Australia's best-known character tenor, Graeme Ewer, was born in Melbourne and appeared in the Australian premiere season of South Pacific in the role of Jerome at age 12. He studied voice with a handful of teachers in Melbourne, including Gertrude Johnston and Annie Portnoj, competing in various singing competitions where he was a finalist in the 1952 popular radio variety contest, Australia's Amateur Hour. In 1964 and 1965, Graeme performed in 3 opera productions for Victorian Opera Company, then began a 2-year contract as Alfred Barrett in Robert and Elizabeth for Garnet H Carroll Management. In 1966-67, Graeme Ewer performed in The King and I, Annie Get Your Gun and The Music Man for Brett Adams' Tent Theatre. The following year, he joined the Australian Elizabethan Trust Opera Company, which became the Australian Opera and later Opera Australia, where he enjoyed a 35-year career performing 77 roles. Now retired, he has lost none of his passion for the art form. And as you will hear in this insightful conversation, Graeme is the most delightful raconteur, recalling episodes from a full career on the stage. Graeme Ewer, nice to be talking to you on stages.
Nice to talk to you too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I have to say, happy birthday for last Thursday, I believe.
Yeah, 85, not out.
How does that feel?
Old.
Well, retirement. Let's talk about that. When did you exit the stage?
Approximately, I think, 2001. I told them that I wanted to retire, and they accepted that. And then suddenly they came to me and they said, "Oh, we're doing a Tales of Hoffmann, and Ian Judge is directing it, and he's asked for you." I said, "No, I don't want to do it." And they said, "But look, he's asked for you. You do it." I said, "No, I don't want to do any more Hoffmanns." And they nagged, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I did it.
So was Hoffmann a bit of a calling card for you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
had you done a few
that particular production was not my favourite production either. I found him quite difficult as a director.
A lot of people.
He really.
I think he had a reputation.
He was very friendly. We used to go to lunch together and chat and talk about theatre, and then he suddenly started to turn the knife. I don't know whether it was to get a better performance out of me, but he got really odd, so it wasn't very pleasant. But I did it. It was a different concept, and I quite enjoyed that, to do something again in a different fashion.
When you returned to productions of Hoffmann, did you find new stuff in the characters?
Always, yeah, you can, yes. Especially in the choreography too. Different choreographies, and different gags, and some not so good. My favourite production was the Tito Capobianco production, the first production with Joan Sutherland. That was magnificent. I loved that, and I loved all the development, and he liked what I was doing. His wife was choreographing Gigi Denda, and it was a terrific collaboration.
That last production of Hoffman that you did would have been at the Opera House.
Yes.
Your place of work for many years.
Yes, Taj Mahal.
Can you describe for me that feeling when you took that last curtain call, and perhaps the realisation that this was the last time? That
yeah. I was really nervous because Moffat had twigged to me that they were going to give me a farewell. I thought, well, I didn't know what form it was going to take. And so the curtain call, I was waiting for something to happen, and the curtain calls were normal. And then suddenly the full company was on the stage, and there were speeches. Anson Austin made a wonderful speech and gave me a good roasting, and they presented me with the Australian Opera Trophy, and all this sort of gold stuff started to fall from the flies, and it was great. And then I had to speak to the audience, and I said, how fortunate the audience was, because not only did they get a performance of the Tales of Hoffman tonight, they got a performance of This Is Your Life. They liked that, and it was good. It was a great night, actually.
Well, it was a 35-year career performing.
34, I think it was.
34.
Yeah.
Well, let's round it.
But I had a couple of years in the chorus.
Right.
At the start. That's where I learned to all the tricks of the trade.
But something like 77 roles, I believe, you played throughout that career.
Yeah, a lot of roles. Yes. Well, when I got the Order of Australia, and the governor said to me, he said, I don't know how you do it. I said, well, I thought he was talking about makeups and things that someone had talked to me that they said that was how I got the medal. But he said, I said, really? He said, yes. He said, how do you remember everything? I said, everything, all those words. I said, that's the easy part. And I wanted to say, well, the hard part is find the man, find the character. That was the hard part. Yeah. Just some of them were very evasive, and the memory was okay till now.
Did you have a favourite character?
Oh, I think the four servants in Hoffman, they were wonderful fun. I used to have a lot of fun with those. And great audience participation. I loved doing the simpleton in Boris Godunov, in Elijah Mazunsky's production. He was a religious maniac, fantastic character. And I could make, and he said, this will fail your whole role. And it was extended with all sorts of business throughout the opera, which is very long. And he said, your whole role will fail if you don't cry real tears at the end of the opera. And I used to work my way right down to the footlights, right down to the orchestra pit, and sing this lament, and then start to cry in the middle of it. And the tears would fall on the audience. And they were real tears. I used to sit for an hour or more thinking of sad things, like the death of my father and the death of the cat. And I could go down and cry and cry and cry. And I used to love that, and then always after, years later, I'd meet Russian people, because I'd be singing about weep, weep for poor Russian folk. And they would say, you brought us to tears. We were crying with you. It was great.
Yes, it's
that was real.
Very rewarding as a performer, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you can find that authenticity.
It wasn't just shtick. It was real. Yeah.
I love the opulence of opera. You've got the best costumes, and the character is completed by sometimes extravagant makeup and wigs.
The costumes used to be extraordinary because every costume was a model gown, and made with the very finest velvets, silks, or whatever they were made from, because they had to stand up to a lot of. Some of them would be broken down then, but they'd always be very good fabrics to start with, and very well cut, and they had to stand up to touring and packing away in skips and travelling and.
But also as a singer, you must feel comfortable, can't you?
Yeah,
I mean, the women, especially in corsets, and if they have to have a death scene and fall on the ground, they've still got to be able to sing and be in touch with their voice.
Yeah. I love clothes. I love the costumes. I tell you a lot of costume stories, but generally, and the cutters, the way they cut fabric, they're all going now. It's going to be a lost art, I think, in the theatre. But I hope that people are being trained. But I just wonder. So many have passed. There was a wonderful cutter called Bill Patterson, and he passed. But he was a beautiful cutter. I would go down to the wardrobe and talk to him. He became a very close friend, and I'd watch him cutting, and it didn't matter how big anything was. We did an exhibition for Moffat in the gallery, the art gallery in Sydney here, of Joan Sutherland's costumes. And because I had a career as a window dresser before I'd been a singer, they asked me to sort of fluff up all the costumes, and I knew how to pack them with paper underneath and dress them out. But I worked with Bill, and he would have these huge, he had an ironing board in the gallery, and he'd throw these huge costumes, and he could handle costume like he was ironing a shirt or a towel or something, and these great expanses of beautiful fabrics. Clever man.
Craftspeople of Bill's generation would have served an apprenticeship of sorts, I guess.
I think they just came up through the ranks. Yeah. And a lot of them learned from. He probably learned in London.
Yes, to go away and
they went away and
they
came home. Yeah.
You would hope today that, and look, I'm sure there is at institutions like NIDA and WAPA, that they are training a new generation of cutters.
Well, the wonderful thing with the Australian Opera and Opera Australia was that we had continuity in the golden years. We had continuity of employment, and everybody had the hatters, the milliners, the cutters,
shoe people.
The shoe people. We had a cobbler.
Yeah.
But he had this continuity of employment, and so that they were there for as long as they wanted to be there, and they had a regular salary, which was very special. And I don't think they have that anymore. There's not the company now that there was.
I did an interview with Rebecca Ritchie, who was head of wardrobe. And
yes.
She took me on a wonderful tour into a wig room, especially, and there were wigs of all sorts and shapes and sizes.
Yeah, well, her father and mother, her mother was a dancer, and her father was technical, I think he was technical director for a while. Technical director, or I don't know, but he was there. They're marvellous people. And Rebecca she's terrific, She's still there.
Yeah. Grew up to the ranks.
Yeah.
Wigs would be quite warm, I imagine, under hot lights.
Yeah, and you wear a wig, a big white wig with a ship on top of it. You wonder why your neck aches. And you're going to masseurs, getting your neck fixed.
Was that the gondoliers?
The gondoliers, yeah. And hats, wigs that were very tight, and then you'd have a beehive, like in Falstaff, you'd have a beehive hat pinned on into the wig, and it takes a bit of handling.
The gondoliers might be a nice segue into Gilbert and Sullivan, because you had a long association with the character.
I loved Gilbert and Sullivan. I loved all the Gilbert and Sullivan roles.
When was the first time that you encountered Gilbert and Sullivan?
I was Louise in the gondoliers, the drummer boy for the Duke of and Duchess of Plaza Toro. It was Dennis Olsen and Rosina Raisbeck, and I was the drummer, and Eileen Hannon was my offsider, the Casilda, and I did a lot of those.
What about as an audience member or as a kid? Did your parents play Gilbert and Sullivan at home?
Yes, and I had a brother that used to like it, and an older brother, and I used to tag along with him. We used to love it. And, I'd have favourite, and I fell in love with the tenor, Terence O'Donoghue. Thought he was fantastic. And years later, of course, I got to know his wife, Sybil O'Donoghue. Terence died.
Right.
And Sybil and I were great mates. She had been a soubrette doing small roles in London for D'Oyly Carte, and she had come out with him on the ship and fallen pregnant on the ship. She had a couple of other children who were on the ship, and they arrived, and she couldn't work because she was pregnant. She fell pregnant on the ship. So J.C. Williamson insisted that she pay her fare, and she had to leave the company because she couldn't perform the soubrette roles pregnant.
Of course.
But she became a great friend, and she had wonderful stories. Going right back to when she was playing in Starlight Roof, during the war, and in London. Incredible.
J.C. Williamson had bought a lot of the Gilpin Sullivans from D'Oyly Carte, hadn't they?
Yeah. They used to bring them out. They would hire them, and they'd send the company out. They'd send. They'd pick up. They'd pick up a chorus in Australia. They'd pick up some of the small roles in Australia, but mostly they'd have the major roles, and even the more important small roles would be done by the D'Oyly Carte Company.
On a tree by a river, a little tomtit sang willow, it willow, it willow. And I said to him, Dicky bird, why do you sit singing willow, it willow, it willow? Is it weakness of intellect, birdie, I cried, or a rather tough worm in your little inside? With a shake of his poor little head, he replied, oh, willow, tit willow, tit willow. He slapped at his chest as he sat on that bough, singing willow, tit willow, tit willow. And a cold perspiration bespangled his brow. Oh, willow, tit willow, tit willow. He sobbed and he sighed, and a gurgle he gave. Then he plunged himself into the billowy wave, and an echo arose from the suicide's grave. Oh, willow, tit willow, tit willow. Now I feel just as sure as I'm sure that my name isn't Willow, tit willow, tit willow. That was blighted affection that made him exclaim, oh, willow, tit willow, tit willow. And if you remain callous and obdurate, I shall perish as he did, and you will know why, though I probably shall not exclaim as I die. Oh, willow, tit willow, tit willow.
Who were the character men that were coming out from D'Oyly Carte?
In the early years?
Delivering the comic roles.
Yeah, in the early years it was Ivan Menzies, who everybody adored Ivan Menzies. And then later it was...
was it a fellow called Graham Clifford?
Graham Clifford. Yeah, Graham Clifford. He would have been the guy that I saw when I was a teenager. Then there was a company that J.C. Williamson's did. They didn't have the D'Oyly Carte Company. They did it under their own auspices. And it had Richard Wordsworth, who also did Lock Up Your Daughters here.
And I think he played Fagin and directed.
And he did
the
Fagin,
Oliver.
yes. He did a production of, not the first time, not the first Oliver, but a later production. He did Oliver, yeah.
So yeah. I guess some of those performers are your early teachers, whether you know it or not, through osmosis.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah. Like we saw everything. We saw all the musicals. Paint Your Wagon. I was in a musical for 12 months, South Pacific.
Yeah.
but all Carousel, the carols, but we saw everything. Louverture, Spanish dances.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to those. So we'll continue with the Gilbert
New York
Sullivan.
City Ballet. We lived in.
You were
the theatre.
spoiled for choice.
we were. Yeah.
Coco, that was the first role that I really encountered you
doing
in the Mikado.
Yeah, Richard Bonning always wanted me to do Coco, and I was never very satisfied with how it turned out. I always thought that it was over-designed, but it was very popular, and I used to have a success every night with the audiences. And then it was done it's been done and done by various people. Anthony Waller had a crack at it, and various people had a go at Coco.
Mitchell Butel.
Wonderful Mitchell, yeah, he was very good. And they used to trot it out, but I think they thought I got too old to do it or something, I don't know.
It's interesting you say they thought it was overly designed. I thought it was beautiful with all those,
I thought it was too. But Moffat always said, you'd be working in front of these incredible drops with Victorian posters and all this stuff behind you, and red, and your costume sort of melted into all the detail of what was on the the posters on the drops behind you. And he thought it was, and there were large wardrobes painted red and fireplaces painted red, and things were moving in and out, and he just thought there was too much there.
So pulling focus a bit from the performance.
Yeah. And I don't know. I did it. It was filmed, but people, and it was filmed again, and usually. On YouTube and things, they always show like Mitchell doing it or Anthony doing it. They never show my version for some reason or other. I don't care.
But it must be nice that some of your performances have been preserved.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, I was so pleased that performance of Iolanthe, although it was later. It was a later production. I thought it was wonderful to have that, and I'd been put into Tralola. Tralola in the original version had been Robert Gard, and then I went into it, and they filmed me in it with Ron McConaughey and Dennis Olsen, and we did it a lot. Actually, we did it for a royal gala for Prince Charles in 2001, I think it was. Can't remember. Do you want to know? I'll tell you.
You can check your CV. Well, with 77 roles, yes, it's important to have a record that you can...
No, it wasn't. It was in the late 70s. What am I talking about, 2001?
Oh, because we were talking about your retirement.
That's right. Yes, 2001.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was the late 70s, and it was a variety show at the Opera House one Sunday night, put on by Harry Miller. And somehow or other they asked us to do the trio from Iolanthe for Prince Charles.
Of course,
he loved it because he came down the line to us and he said, I could have watched you guys all night. He loved his Gilbert and Sullivan. Yeah, it was good.
And now he's the king. How about that?
And we used to always do 3 encores, and do different business every encore. It was good.
They're
always got them.
Wonderful satirical works, of course.
Oh, brilliant.
And in the Mikado as Coco, you have a little list. Were you able to have input into? No,
that was done for us.
That was all
done for and it had to change every city you went to. Patter songs changed
to localise.
Yes, the duet with the Duke and Duchess of Plaza Toro, small titles and orders. That was always changed. We used to get so muddled. Bob and I. The first night of the Gondoliers in Sydney, the opening night of that production, which was done by Brian MacDonald from Canada, it was a fantastic production. And Bob and I came on with Casilda, Louis the drummer, and a gondolier who was carrying this, and we all carried this huge gondola. And we came on, went round and down to the front of the stage and turned it parallel to the orchestra pit, and we all clambered out. I fell out of it. And then Bob had the first line, and he said, "Oh, at last we have arrived." He was supposed to say in Venice. And he said, "Oh, at last we have arrived in Paris." I thought, holy moly, God, what are we going to get? How are we going to get out of this? So I said, "Venice." And then he kept trying. It was terrible. He was so nervous. And then anyway, we just settled down. And the rest of the show went perfectly. But I'll never forget that. Oh, my heart was thumping.
Keeps it fun. Keeps it alive.
Yeah, kept it alive, all right.
As someday it may happen that a victim must be found, I've got a little list of society offenders who might well be underground and who never would be missed, There's the pestilential nuisances who write for autographs, or people who have flabby hands and irritating laughs. All children who are masterminds in trivial pursuit. All perfect match competitors who bore us being cute. And all third persons who on toiling tete-a-tete insist. Need none of them be missed. Need none of them be missed.
He's got it on the list. He's got it on the list. And they none of them be missed. And none of them be missed.
Ah, there's the folk song serenader and the pop star off his face and the sympathizerist. I've got him on the list. All people who eat garlic bread and puff it in your face, they never would be missed. They never would be missed. Then the idiot who praises with enthusiastic tone all centuries but this and every country but his own. And the punk from the provinces with hair all glue and dye, who doesn't think he dances but he'd rather like to try. And that singular anomaly, the active feminist, I don't think she'd be missed. I'm sure she'll not be missed.
He's got it on the list. He's got it on the list. And I don't think she'll be missed. I'm sure she'll not be missed.
And that overfunded nuisance who just now is rather rife, the Royal Commissionist, I've got him on the list. All funny fellas, comic men, and clowns of private life, they never would be missed, they never would be missed. And apologetic statesmen of a mini-budget kind, such as, what do you call it, Thingamy Bob, and Fred no, never mind, and Barry, what's he worth, and also Joe and Flo. But the task of filling up the blanks I'd rather leave to you, for it really doesn't matter who you put them on the list. They'd none of them be missed. They'd none of them be missed.
You may put them on the list. You may put them on the list. And then none of them be missed. And none of them be missed.
Now, do you still have a sing around the house or in
I
the
can't
shower?
sing. It's gone. It's a muscle. If you don't use it, if you don't practice, it goes. Yeah, I'm having a bit of trouble with my larynx at the moment, and I don't bother. I whistle,
Right.
and I hum,
So there's no time.
but I love text. I love words. Words come back.
Yeah.
You know, and I can rattle off text.
Well, what about these words? Dites-moi
Ah, yeah.
pourquoi
Pourquoi
la vie est belle. Dites-moi pourquoi
la vie est gaie. Dites-moi pourquoi la mademoiselle est-ce que parce que vous m'aimez. I remember the conductor, Gabriel Joff, he spoke French and he took us through the French because the whole role was, the lines were in French. And he took us through, and he took us through the song. And he just took us through it twice. We sang it, and that's all the rehearsal we had. And it was always perfect. It was always, no one ever came up and said, you know, if your French is not quite right. Or anything. It was just spot on. He was a very good teacher, you know, very good imparting of knowledge.
Gabriel Joff was, of course,
the conductor
and
J.C. Williams
for a lot of J.C. Williams
Yeah,
shows.
yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of those shows you mentioned before, like
Yeah.
Paint Your Wagon and Brigadoon,
Yeah,
South
that's
Pacific.
right. Brigadoon, yeah.
Pajama Game, of course.
Yeah,
that
Pajama
really
Game.
Iconic
I didn't see
production.
Brigadoon, that was a bit early.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, that song is from South Pacific,
Yeah.
in which you played the role of Jerome at
Yeah.
age 11, probably
12.
12.
In America, the Ngana is the girl and Jerome is the boy. The Ngana, Ngana, so it's Ngana. She was older. She was an older girl, about 12, and the boy was a tiny boy. But they had trouble finding boys. They had good girls. They went to ballet schools to get the girls, and the one I first had was tiny little girl called Margaret Puttyfoot, and then I had lovely girls after that. There was a beautiful girl called Desley Gare and another girl called Helen Roost. I can remember the names. There were two other boys, both the sort of same size as I was at 12, but they couldn't find them, so they went to the Catholic schools. And they went to the Christian Brothers schools. And myself and another boy were from our school, and there was another boy called Kevin Kidney, whose father was a butcher. And so kind of opposite to what they had in America, they had a taller boy, an older boy, and a younger girl. And in America they had the older girl and the younger boy. And today when they do South Pacific, they there's lots of talented children around, and they always get little totters, and it works very well. But I think it worked very well, and we had an American director. He'd been the stage manager on Broadway with Mary Martin and Ezio Pinza. There'd been a terrible row apparently, or a falling out with Ezio Pinza and Mary Martin over a heater. They had a heater outside their dressing rooms. Ezio Pinza had a dressing room, there was the heater, and Mary Martin had a dressing room on the other side of the heater. Mary Martin would come in and turn the heater up, and he would come in and turn the heater down, being an opera singer. So this went on, and there was a terrible hassle and disagreement about it, and it really sort of got to, fisticuffs. Not really, but verbal. And apparently... you've read in many of the books about Charlie Atkins. His name was Charles Atkins. He was Charles Atkins out here as the director, but he was Charlie Atkins on Broadway as a stage manager. Chuck, Charlie actually, and he solved the problem. He placated the problem between Ezio Pinza and Mary Martin. I always loved that story. But he was a lovely man, and he gave me some terrific notes. He gave me one note, and he got down on his knee and he talked to me and he said, "There's a terrific laugh," he said, "and you're missing that, Graeme." He said, "It's good, but he said, you can make it better." And we would be standing at the end, just right at the end, and we were having soup, and suddenly there were aircraft going over above, and Nellie Forbush would say, "Oh," and she would look out and she said, "The big ones are battleships and the small ones are destroyers." And a big plane would go over it, and she'd say, that's, and I'd say, P-40s. And he'd say, if you say P-40s, you'll get a big laugh. I got it every night.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's all the delivery.
Kid. Yeah, just a kid. But, and the French...
Who was your Debec and Nellie?
Richard Collette was a Swede. He was Emile Debec, and the Nellie was Mary LaRoche. I think she might have been an understudy on Broadway, but she was
Americans had come out.
See,
they'd come out, been important for the show. Yeah,
there's a very interesting book by the man that auditioned me for the role. I was called up to this teacher who used to run the choir, a man called Brother Reed. And he said, "I want you to go into the city." And we're all trained how to go into the city. He was very social, and he used to teach us things like how to drive, how to conduct, how to go into the city, all the streets. We had to memorise all the streets. He said, "Go up to this street. It's in Exhibition Street. Go down to your left. to Her Majesty's Theatre, ask to see this certain man. He will take you and tell you, you're going to sing for these people.
And you were 12?
I was 12. Yeah. And in I go, and he said, now you'll take this sheet music. It was I'll Walk Beside You. And it was a ballad. And he said, you will sing. He said, I want you to sing this section here, which shows your voice off. Just sing that bit. So in I went, and this man met me. I think he was called Donnelly. He was the chief accountant, and he had been taught by this brother as a youngster in somewhere or other in Sydney, I think, and he come to Melbourne. And he took me in and he introduced me to a man called Claude Kingston. And Claude Kingston was one of the directors of J.C. Williamson's, and used to be the talent scout who would go out. He found Richard Collette, who played Emile de Bec. It's all written in this book called Doesn't It Seem a Day Too Long? And he says that Nevin Tate had his eye on a baritone who had been out with the Italian Grand Opera Company for J.C. Williamson's. And he was in America, and they wanted him to do Emile de Bec. But Claude Kingston had found Richard Collette and thought he was more elegant, and he had a nice accent, and not an Italian accent, and more like a French accent. And anyway, he had the argument with Nevin Tate, and they eventually he won. Claude Kingston won, and they got Richard Collette. So anyway, I met this man. He was a nice, gentle old man, and he said, hello. He said, what have you got for us? And I said, Brother Reed told me to sing page 4 and 5. So he said, all right. He said, I'm going to play the piano for you. He said, oh, just a minute. And so he went down the pit. Apparently, according to the book, he was a very good organist, very famous organist and pianist. So we went down. The music came up from the pit, from the piano, and I sang page 4 and page 5. And then he popped up in the pit and he said, Graeme, he said, would you sing it all for me? I said, yes, sir. And sang it all, which was a party piece anyway.
Yeah.
And I sang it on the amateur hour for Terry Deer, and won sections and got to the finals, but that's another story. Anyway, so it was a party piece, and he said no. And they came up and they said, well, we'll get in touch with your parents and the school. I was in.
Just like that.
Yeah, and we didn't know right up, the 3 boys. I did all the rehearsals, and I thought, that's odd. I did all the rehearsals. They used to sit in the auditorium and watch me. And sometimes they weren't even called. I was called alone and did the rehearsals. And we first did the rehearsals with Ian Roberts, who was the stage director of Her Majesty's Theatre. And then we did the rehearsals with the principals, Mary LaRoche and Richard Collette. And then we did the photo calls, we did in costume, and we did the dress rehearsals, and then the general rehearsal and whatever. They didn't do previews in those days. Right. You did a dress rehearsal and then you're on. You're on. Yeah. Saturday night, big night, everybody was there. Yeah. So I've lost my train of thought now.
Had you come from a musical household then?
No. We had music in the house. Yeah. We all sort of sang together. I had a twin sister and a younger sister, and we the 3 of us used to sing a lot. I had an older sister and older brother. They didn't bother, but like we'd be seconded to do the dishes and we'd sing. We'd just sing and we'd harmonise, and so there was kind of music always in the house. And we had songsters. So they were called songsters. They were little, tiny little books with all the words of all the pop songs, like 20 pages of pop songs. And we'd have them memorised and we'd sing them and we'd listen to them on the radio and we knew them and we'd harmonise. And then when I started to earn money at J.C. Williamson's, I used to earn 7 guineas a week. That's a lot of big money in those days.
Kid, yeah.
And I used to do 4 performances a week, 4 on and 8 off, because there were 3 sets of children.
Right.
So I only did 4 performances a week and I got 7 guineas a week. And I never saw the money. My mother would take the pay envelope. And the only thing I ever saw of that money was she bought me a piano. The family bought me a piano. And it was, we all had the piano. We all had piano lessons. And my long-suffering father would sit in his chair smoking his pipe and having to listen to the practice. One would turn up, practice for half an hour, another one would turn up. But we had a cousin who used to come around on a Friday night with her mother, and they were wonderful people. And they were very kind to my mother. Her mother, my cousin's mother, Auntie Lizzie, was very kind to my mother during the Depression. And she worked in hotels and things, and she could bring food. She used to bring sort of, half-eaten legs of lamb and things for the family. So they had food during the Depression. But my cousin, Margaret, used to play the piano for us. So we'd have great sing-alongs, fabulous. So there was music in the house. I would go to lots of concerts with my mother. We went to the opera occasionally. And she would come and sit in the dressing room with me night after night for a year, and chaperone me.
Yeah.
She'd come in, knit, while I did homework, And then I got older and she used to let me go in sometimes on my own. It was a bit frightening coming home on the train, but...
At night,
yeah. But I used to manage.
You'd done a production of Carmen prior to South Pacific, hadn't you?
How did you know that?
Oh, I did my research.
How did you know that? Yeah, actually, Gertrude Johnston had come to the school because, again, they had problems with getting kids for the Carmen chorus, or for anything. And they came to the school because they'd heard we had a very champion choir. We won everything. It was a very good choir. Brother Reed was a very good choir master. And she came and she said we were going to be in this production of Carmen. Actually, Brother Reed announced it. He said, does anybody know anything about the National Theatre? And I put my hand up. I said, I do, sir. He said, well, what do you know? I said, well, sir, there's a production of Carmen coming, and it's starring Justine Reddick, Muriel Luke, and Ivan Dixon from London. He said, how do you know that? I said, I read the listener in. So next minute, he said, well, next week, the lady that runs the National Theatre, she's coming, and we want you to bring old clothes in. And her name is Miss Gertrude Johnston, and she's very famous. She sang with Nellie Melba. I thought, oh, this is terrific. So in she came, and she was always the same. She was divine. She was dazzling. She actually gave me singing lessons for a while.
Wow.
She said, I'll have you singing top C before you can say knife. Knife. She had a studio in Washington Street in Toorak, and she'd insist on driving me after my lesson. She adored me, and I loved her. Didn't work with her for very long. I'd been encouraged to go to her by William P. Carr, who had been director of productions of drama at the National Theatre. Anyway, that's another story. How long have we got? Anyway, it's a lifetime. Anyway, she used to drive me up to the bus stop, and I'd say, no, not necessarily, Miss Johnson, I'll be fine. I go, no, darling, I'm going to drive you up to the bus stop. So she gave me in this little car, vroom, vroom. She'd take off. We'd turn out of Washington Street into another street, and then we're going to turn right into Toorak Road in peak time, 5:30, 6 o'clock. She wouldn't stop. She just go straight into the traffic and do a right-hand turn. Oh, it was a nightmare. She drove like Mr. Magoo. It was wonderful. Anyway, what's that got to do with anything? But it's all part of life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Tell me about Gertrude Johnson then. Was she Australian?
Oh, she She was Australian, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but of course she was much travelled, and she sang in Europe and in Britain anyway.
And a protege of Melbourne.
Well, she sang with Melbourne, yeah. Eventually. Well, I think probably in Australia. She wasn't the only. There was another one called Amy Castles that sang with. She was an Australian. She sang with Melba. I think that's right. Moffat will correct me. You said Amy Castles. That's wrong. It's not wrong. I think it's right.
And Gertrude started an opera company, which really was the forerunner of.
But there were opera companies in Australia. Oh, yeah. The Williamsons. The old Williamsons, they had their opera companies, and they would bring people from Europe, but they used a lot of Australian talent. But this woman came to the school, and we put all these old clothes on, and then next thing we were at rehearsals at the Princess Theatre for Carmen, and we had little newspaper hats and wooden swords, and went. It was great. We did that. I remember seeing a performance of the Italian Grand Opera, and the children's of Carmen, and the children's chorus came in, and they started off. They were miles out with the orchestra, and they had a prompt box, and they had a little prompter called Adelio Zaganara, who I worked with later. And he had been an Italian, he was a member of the company, and he used to do prompts. And he was prompting, and he had his hand out. You could see his hand out, and he was trying to get the kids. And he was calling out, Next minute, he crawled out on the prompt box. And the kids were over there singing all out of tune and he was on the floor, absolutely visible to the audience.
Yeah.
Trying to get, and then he gave up and went, and he crawled back into the box. The prompt box.
Good to know when you're beaten.
Yeah, I thought, well, we were better than that.
Now, when I spoke to Joan Carden, she told me that she had her first singing teacher was an English Wagnerian soprano called Thea Phillips. But she
worked with Thea Phillips.
Did you?
I worked with everybody.
Of course you have.
Yeah, well, that's why my voice was so good.
Graeme Ewer. but
she was a lovely woman.
Was she?
I loved her. She was really nice. We used to work in a sort of tenement area at the back of the old Savoy Theatre in Melbourne. Which would you have remembered that?
No.
That was in Russell Street.
Right.
She was lovely. Yeah, she lived in Ferntree Gully.
Right. And
her husband used to come in at the end. I always have the last lesson, and he used to come in and pick her up.
Joan also studied with a man called Henry Portnoj.
Oh, yeah. I studied with Henry's wife.
I was going to say, you were with an Annie Portnoj.
Yeah, Annie.
They were a husband and wife teaching together.
Annie Portnoj was John Germain's teacher. John was a baritone in the company. And he said, I've got a fabulous teacher. And he said, you'll really like her. And I thought, I was over singing teachers. But I went to her and she was absolutely marvellous. She taught John Lanigan,
right,
who was a principal at Covent Garden. And I remember she said, we're going to work on the top C. And one day I sang a top C. And she rang her husband, Henri. She said, I got to tell Henri. So she rang and she said, Henri, Graeme has just sung a top C. And Henri said, the cruel C.
The singing teacher's role in a singer's career is very important, isn't it? I mean, it's like a marriage. They're psychologists of sorts.
I had a singing teacher in Melbourne. My mother was desperate when Brother Reed died, and there was no choir, and I was going to a technical school that had no music, and if they did a play, because I was in the working with the Shakespeare Company at the time, they wouldn't use me in a play. They'd use another boy, So I was absolutely ostracised, anything in the arts. My mother took me to a concert in the South Melbourne Town Hall, and there was a lady singing, a Hungarian lady called Markita Sajova, and she was a mezzo-soprano. She was singing, and my mother said, oh, she's a good singer. She said, I wonder if she teaches. So she went to her and she said, yes. She said, I teach, and I live in Albert Park. I've got a small flat, and I teach in my small flat. And yes, send him along. and I would have been 14 maybe. And from that day until I was in my 20s, 9 years I was with her, and she taught me. She taught me the rudiments of singing, and my voice never broke. And she taught me right through that. She guided me through that period. When I was 20, I could, in 19, 20, I could sing countertenor. And I found a recording of Alfred Barrett, and I said, this is the repertoire. I used to call her Madam. This is the repertoire I want to sing. So she worked on it, we got some repertoire together, and I used to go and sing for the sort of gallery first nighters, the Shakespearean Society of Victoria, and sing these daffy sort of Where the Bee Sucks, and various things, English folk songs as a countertenor. And then I said to her one day, I said, I think I've got a male voice coming. I said, I think I've got a few notes. And I had about 6 notes. And she just quietly worked on it, scaled it, and gave me stuff that I could sing. And she was really very good to me. But I was never getting anywhere really with my singing. And I suddenly thought, look, I've got to go. I've got to get out into the world and try and get on the stage and sing. And last thing I took to her was Così fan tutte. I bought a score of Così fan tutte, and I'd learned the first act, and I brought it to her and I sang it right through, and she couldn't believe it. I said, look, it's time to go, and I said, I'm thinking about it, and she got a bit sort of cross and said, well, do you want to go? And I just rang her one day and said, I'm sorry, I can't have any more lessons. It was probably the wrong way to do it, but it had to have an ending.
Hit it, maestro! Mary had a little wooden whistle, was a little present from her dad. He said, Mary, if there's any trouble, dear, blow a little whistle and your daddy, he'll be there. She went strolling with her chap that evening. In the park he started getting gay. He said, please, give me a little squeeze. And Mary grabbed the whistle right away. Wooden whistle, wooden whistle, wooden whistle. No, it was not so slow, that kissing her, you know. And every time it's still a kiss, she'd blow. But wooden whistle. No matter how she tried, it wouldn't go. He said, you're just that kind of girl for me. And kissed her underneath the willow tree. She tried to blow the whistle, the little wooden whistle, but the little wooden whistle wouldn't blow. Mary and her dad went on a picnic. There she met a nifty little chap. He said, let's go on the lake, dear, for a row. Quickly she consented, for she loved
Please join Graeme and I in part 2 of a riveting conversation detailing Graeme's triumphs on the stage and further investigation of the craft from one of our finest performers of the operatic repertoire. And my thanks too to Brian Castles-Onion for his assistance with the music tracks you've heard today and for his encyclopedic knowledge of the operatic canon and the art form in Australia. Graeme Ewer, part 2 in our next episode of the Stages podcast. I can't wait. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with opera legend Graeme Ewer. Graeme was awarded a Member Order of Australia in 1994 and received the Opera Australia Trophy in 2001. His dedication to his craft and the operatic art form has been a lesson to at least 2 generations of performers. Graeme's career defines him as one of the jewels in the crown of opera in Australia. He carved a career as an audience favourite and was a master of characterisation and comic timing. His 4 roles in Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann were unique, unsurpassed successes, as was his Njegus in The Merry Widow. A career highlight was performing the title role in Albert Herring at a Royal Command performance at the Sydney Opera House. But one imagines that Tom Rakewell in The Rake's Progress and Gustav von Aschenbach in Death in Venice, rarities in his performing repertoire, may have been personal highlights. Now retired, he has lost none of his passion for the art form. And as you will hear in this insightful conversation, Graeme is the most delightful raconteur, recalling episodes from a full career on the stage.
I was working with this Samaritan Night Opera Company. I was doing the scenery. I was painting cloths. I was painting huge cloths. And at night in empty scout holes and things. And we did Oklahoma, we did New Moon, and then they did Bill Carr, this William P. Carr, Bill Carr, he produced New Moon, and I had a small role in a speaking role. And then they did White Horse Inn. And they were auditioning this night, and they had this night where they were just having auditions, and anybody could get up and sing and do the lines, and they were trying to work out who, and he was there. And they couldn't find anybody to do the tenor part of Valentine Sutton. And so anyway, I just walked up, I said, I'll have a go. And they all laughed, because they knew I painted the scenery. I got up and I sang the backside off it. It was, the white horse in, the white horse in. And they all applauded. And then suddenly they thrust a script into my hand and I read the dialogue. And they said, right, the part's yours. So it was really successful. I had a great success doing that and enjoyed it tremendously. And he said, Bill Carr said, look, I'm forming this company. Over the road, he had a club called the 57 Club Theatre. And he said, I'd like you to come over and be a part of the club and the cast. And he said, I want to do the Glass Menagerie. And I didn't know what that was, or who Tennessee Williams was, but I fronted up. I was pretty cheeky. And they, he gave me this script and... he said, go away and learn it, and I came to a few rehearsals. He took me through it a bit. He was a very old-fashioned director. You just sort of did it yourself, and he'd correct a few things. He'd do it by, he'd say it, and he'd give you line readings. Yes. That sort of...
a demonstrative director.
Yeah,
do
but
it
in
like
a nice way.
Yeah.
No, he was never that demonstrative. He'd just quietly say, try this, try that. So I remember we did this play, and I learned I was very quick with learning lines.
You played Tom, didn't you?
Tom, yeah. And Patsy Hemingway was the daughter, and there was a girl who'd been a nun. She was the mother. Amanda. I loved that play. It was so
beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. And this tiny theatre. We got an audience. We did about 5 performances of it. And Patsy Hemingway, the boy was Patsy, the gentleman caller was Patsy Hemingway's boyfriend. Really good young actor, never did anything after that, but terrific. I forget his name, Peter Raphael, I think his name was. And so the first night I thought, this speech, this first speech, I have tricks in my pockets, I have things up my sleeve. I'm the opposite of a stage magician. It goes on and on and on. The plot is fantasy. The plot is fantasy. Being a miracle. Oh, I can't remember. And it sort of talks about everybody in the play and the social background of the play. It's huge. And I thought, how am I going to do this? So I did it. Got through it. No worries. A mild. I thought a lot about the accent, the American accent, because of Tennessee Williams. I wanted to make it a little bit southern, not sort of a Bronx American accent or a New York posh accent, but a little bit of the southern accent. And Amanda's got it, and I used to listen to the Amanda's dialogue, and I would get the rise and fall of it. Yeah, the lilt of it. And anyway, I had a terrific success with it. And years later, we did a really good production of it at the National Theatre Rooms in they had a new theatre in Toorak Road, and who was in the mother was Charlie Norman's wife, Pat Norman.
Yeah.
I love Pat, but I later worked with Charlie Norman in the Bowl Music Hall, but that's another story. How long have we got? But a wonderful story about that theatre in Toorak Road.
Yeah.
Apparently, Bill Carr said, "We've got this property. It's really good. It's been an old theatre and it's got great." And it had a big door on Toorak Road, and you open the door, and the entrance to the theatre was up a huge flight of stairs, concrete stairs, and at the top of the stairs was a male toilet, and then you went to the right and into this theatre area that he dolled up into a theatre. Anyway, so he took Miss Johnston, Gertrude Johnston, to see it for the first time. And he said, "Now this is the entrance, Gertrude." And he said, "Up the stairs." And he said, "And to the right," he said, "is the theatre." And the door of the toilets was open. And it was all the urinals. It was a male toilet. And she said, "Oh, Bill," she said, "it's wonderful." She said, "And I've always wanted a theatre with showers." We laughed at that. We loved that.
You played Higgins in Pygmalion also.
Well, that was at the 57 Club Theatre. That was with Elaine McKenna.
Right.
And that was marathon. But I enjoyed that. But she never knew her lines.
That's hard, isn't it, when you're playing opposite Eliza?
Yeah, because she was so busy at Channel 9, and she was saying, "Oh, I'll know it next week. I'll know it next week." But even on the opening night, I was sort of giving her little cues, or emphasising cues within Higgins' lines. Because good plays often did that. Tennessee Williams, you always gave you a cue to the next line in the line prior, especially at the end of speeches. It was great.
Well-written plays.
Beautiful, yeah.
You alluded earlier also to Shakespeare, of course, and you're a member of the Stratford-on-Avon Memorial Theatre Company.
Yeah, well, it was, when South Pacific was coming to an end, it was going to Sydney. And, the boys all thought, I never saw the other boys in the whole run of South Pacific, except one night, when we did a gala performance. That's another story. But
have you written a book? You thought of writing a book?
No, I couldn't. I started to write one. It was too personal. I couldn't do it. Yeah. I threw it out. Yeah. So everybody in the company started to think, who's going to Sydney? And I thought, I don't think I can go to Sydney. I've got to go to school and blah blah blah. And suddenly the stage manager, Teddy Hunt, he used to do my makeup every night, because one of the other boys, he had to have his makeup done because he was fair-skinned, but there was another boy called John Brodie, and he was very olive-skinned, and he used to get very tan. They had sunray lamps and the CBs that were nothing like a dame, and anybody that wanted to get a suntan, they all probably got skin cancer because it was just sunray lamps. Anyway, Teddy Hunt said to me, "You're not going to Sydney. You're going into the Shakespeare Company." He said, that's the next thing in here. He said, the man came here yesterday from the company, and he asked to see a photograph of the boys, and he said, they had this picture of us in the stage management office, and he went to the picture and he said, I want that boy, and he pointed to me, because it was the Banished Duke's pages, and they wanted two, cheeky kids. And he said, I want that boy. He said, we've got one. But he said, oh, can I have that boy? He said, yeah, perfect. Because he liked me, and he said, I wanted to stay in Melbourne. So, I went, and I did all the Melbourne performances, and I went on the tour to Tasmania, Hobart, Launceston, and then I went with them came back to Melbourne, and then we went to Launceston. So I was sitting at the feet of Anthony Quayle every night while he said, all the world's a stage, and the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrance. On and on he went. I'm sitting at it, with my arm on his legs. And it was fantastic.
It's quite auspicious beginnings,
Oh,
Graeme.
fantastic. And Barbara Jefford. We were going from Hobart to Launceston on a bus. The company was on a bus. And Barbara Jefford was with her boyfriend, Terence Longden, a very handsome young actor. Used to play Cassio in Othello and things. And so they were coming up in a limousine. And so I started to get bus sick. I used to always get bus sick. If I was going to a Stedfords to Dandenong, I'd have to say, stop the car, I'd get out and throw up, and I'd get in the car and we'd go to Dandenong and I'd win the competition, Drive home, stop, throw up. I was always throwing up. And so anyway, I said, I'm going to be sick. And some of the actors said, right, hey, they went to the bus driver and they said, stop the car, Graham's going to be sick. So they let me out, and I was throwing up on the side of the road in the middle of the nowhere between Hobart and Launceston. Suddenly this limo pulled up. Barbara Jefford got out and she came over and she cuddled me. She said, you all right, darling? I said, I'm sick. And she said, he'll come to Launceston with us in the car. So I was bundled into the car with the driver, and they canoodled in the back all the way to Launceston. And then, it was just amazing. It was just lucky. When I was born a twin. And I was born, not my sister, I was born with a caul on my face. Do you know what a caul is?
No, I don't.
A caul is a skin that completely covers the baby's face, and they have to cut it off. And in past times, there was a superstition that sailors would queue up outside the maternity wards of hospitals to get these cauls, these pieces of skin that they cut off the baby's face, and they would have a little bag, a muslin bag, and they'd put it in it, and they'd tie it around their neck. If you have a caul, a baby's caul, you'll never drown. And it's a fact, apparently, if you're born with a caul, you'll never drown. And the doctor came out, an old family doctor called Dr. Walsh, and he came out and he said to my mother, this one's going to be lucky. He's very lucky. He said he's born with a caul on his face. But I've been lucky all my life.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well,
there you go.
Well, that works.
Boogie.
Are you a swimmer?
Yeah, I loved swimming,
No.
yeah. But I don't do it anymore, man. I can't. Wouldn't go near a pool. I hate sharks. Now I wouldn't go in I wouldn't go down Balmoral. No, I don't go in the water. Too old now. But I used to always swim. Yeah, loved to set them off. We always hotels. First thing we do is go straight to the pool. Yeah, good.
1966, the Princess Theatre, Robert and Elizabeth.
Oh yeah.
Garnet Carroll.
Oh, there's another thing.
Oh yes.
That's a lucky story. I was doing with this company conducted a conductor called Leonard Spira, who had an opera company, and it was a spin-off from the Victorian Opera. It was called Victorian Opera, and they were doing Gypsy Baron. I did a couple of shows with them. I did Merry Wives of Windsor by Nicolai, and I did this Gypsy Baron. and we were doing it at the Palais Theatre. And this night, we had to line up after the show, and Viola Wilson, Lady Tate, the wife of Sir Frank Tate, was at the performance, and she wanted to meet the singers. And she came down the line and she said to me, there are auditions tomorrow at Her Majesty's Theatre for the Great Waltz. And she said, I think it would be very important for you to go and do this audition. She said, I will arrange it. She said, do you work? I said, yes. And she said, what time could you get away? I said, oh, probably 10:30, because I usually whizzed off for a cup of tea or something at 10:30. And I knew I was not going to be busy the next day anyway. So she said, be there at 10:30 and I'll arrange for you to do an audition. So up I went and did the audition. And I remembered her from South Pacific. And she was always she used to come in and see, she loved Virginia Paris, and she loved Mary LaRoche, and she'd see Richard Collette, and she was always hanging around the dressing rooms and having chats and cups of tea and things. And so I sort of knew who she was. So anyway, I fronted up, and Johnny Robertson was the... did you know Johnny Robertson?
Very well, yes.
Oh, what a nice man. Yeah. Oh, I love Johnny. And he was at the door. I didn't know him from a bump on a log. And he said, hello, Graeme. He said, you come in. So he took me onto the stage, and it was a very, very hot day, I remember. And I saw out of the corner of my eye a boy from the National Theatre, he was a German boy, I think, and he was a product of Gertrude Johnston, and I knew he had a really good voice. And so anyway, I went on the stage, and then they asked me to sing something, Girls Were Made to Love and Kiss. So I sang that, and they said, would you sing a top C? I thought, I haven't got a top C, I don't think.
The Cruel C. The
Cruel C was back in my life. I thought, oh, well, I had a go, and I tried one, and I cracked, and then he said, well, you can have another go. Try it. It was John McCallum and George Carden. George Carden was the choreographer, and I cracked again, and I said, I'm sorry, it's a very hot day. I said, I said, if it was in something that I could sing, but it's just to sing like that, I can't. I said, oh, and he said, well, look, read some dialogue. So Johnny Robertson had the dialogue, and he gave it to me, and he took one part and I took the other, and I read it, and there was a scene in a lollipop shop or something, and it was great, and it went really well. And he said, and they said, yeah, well, thank you, that's good. They said, look, we think you can't, we would like you to understudy the part that and we can do something with the top C, and will you play a minor role in it, this part of so and so. I said no. I was uppity. I never wanted to understudy.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, thank you. No, I said I don't want to understudy, but thank you very much. And I just walked off. And I walked off, and John Robertson followed me, and we got in the wings. He said, good on you. He said, no, don't do it. And he said, go up to the Princess Theatre. He said, I'll tell them you're coming. And he said, audition. They're doing a show up there called Robert and Elizabeth. And he said, there's a part there, he said, that you'll be absolutely right for. So I said, oh, okay, thank you very much. And shook his hand and went up. And someone was waiting for me, and I was ushered in onto the stage. And Charles Hickman was in the audience. He was the director from London. Did name mean anything to you? No. He'd been a big director in London, directing musicals, going right back. He'd done an opera out here. Did Ariadne off Naxos out here. So anyway, he was standing there and in the row of seats. He was very pleasant, and he said, what would you like to sing for me? I said, Girls Are Made to Love and Kiss. So he said, lovely. So I sang it. He said, that's very good. He said, do you work? I said, yes. He said, where do you work? I said, at Myers. He said, oh, then he said, it's true. You can get everything at Myers. He said, we want you in the show. Would you like to be in the show? I said, I'd love to be in the show. He said, very well. He said, we'll talk contracts and things later. And he said, talk to the management. He said, lovely, thank you. And from actually ever since that, he was always really, really nice to me.
Schooled in filial piety, safe from the perils of Victorian society. Father preserves us under lock and key. Ours feel respect, spiritual next, getting involved with the opposite sex, not we. Most practically, no, not we.
From every conceivable passion, from every improbable vice,
from some that are thoroughly nasty,
and a few that are really rather nice.
He shows his rock, he's a rock. Yes, morally our father is a rock.
If one of us should die, a girl, or experience a momentary passing joy, he would die.
Yes, he died. He unquestionably died. Of shock. We think as one, react as one.
We never do what should not be done.
And we then simply mention good clean fun in the family Moulton Barrett. Mamma is sweet.
Papa's severe.
Mama passed on.
Papa's still here.
the ways of Providence are not quite clear.
To the family Moulton Barrett. Sex is not permissible. If you're kissable, kindly go away. We may not take hold of you.
Oh, how bold! He wanted me to hold him.
We're always calm, we never fuss.
I would like a big man's hair to muff.
The sins of the flesh are not for us. The family Moulton Barrett. Whatever we do, whatever we say, is one strict rule that we all obey.
No one gets in the family way, in the family Moulton Barrett.
Wicked cousin Caroline dared to take a shine to a certain man.
What's more, having went with him,
Went to bed with him.
Parallel has fainted.
tempt them, devil, Papa once cried.
We're eager to be tempted, we
But
reply.
the devil just shrugged his horns inside.
What with conscience pricking us?
Father keeping us coming in the rear.
We stay starkly celibate.
Scared to pick a mate and propagate the species.
Onward, Moulton Barrett, down with heaven's foes.
How we ever got here, heaven only knows.
We love Papa, oh dear Papa, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear Papa.
He really is a very, very dear Papa.
He's Edward Moulton Barrett.
We've learnt our Bibles backwards.
Such a beautiful light to bring. But Polly excluding a chap was the only sight to get of him.
Or her.
The only sight of him.
When we told them we can't go dancing, we simply like to scream.
Then we recall the missing of a ball where almost a cricket is a team.
Hey ho, knights and baggers and loves and carousel, we love a ride.
Says our saintly patriarch straight from Noah's Ark.
Riding is for Moulton.
Well, one thing's
The
clear.
past is past. If someone doesn't do something fast,
You're looking at a positively final cast.
You'll be the last, my son, of the formerly infertile, presently thrifty. Parking downside of number 50, Moulton Barrett of Wimpole Street. Worst 1, a 2, 3, a 4, the following good for rapidly shrinking.
Wouldn't it be heaven to get absolutely stinking?
Moulton Barrett of Wimpole Street, Oxford Street, and Cavendish Square. West 1.
I had a lovely role, Alfred Barrett, which I think is a really, really good role. There are two roles in The Brothers, Alfred Barrett and the little boy that stutters, and that was Andrew Guild. And Andrew and I became great friends. We were just inseparable. We were always together, even when we toured. We lived together in Sydney. We were always mates. The other parts were good parts, but they were special parts. And one day Jim Bronhill called me into a room. She said, "If I hear something good about someone, I always pass it on." And she said, Charles Hickman was in here. He came back during the run of the show. And he said, Charles Hickman was in here last night talking to me. And he said, one of the things he said was, if ever, and he had done productions in London of The Merry Widow. He said, if I ever did The Merry Widow again, and I did it here in Australia, my Danilo would be Graeme. That was a nice one. And years later I did Danilo.
Yeah.
Bob Gard got sick in Adelaide, and I went on and did 2 performances. The night I was doing Don Basilio in Figaro and Don Curzio in the afternoon, and at night I did first performance premiere for me of Danilo in The Merry Widow. And then the next Monday, the Monday after the Saturday, was a youth performance, which is fantastic. Youth, if you got a youth performance, you're very lucky.
So, as well as June, Bronhill, of course, in Robert and Elizabeth, you're working alongside people like Dennis Quilly or Frank Thring.
Dennis was a lesson. He was wonderful.
Yeah.
I remember he was so nice to me in the rehearsal period, and I was just in awe of him. He was just such a wonderful actor, and word perfect with his dialogue in rehearsals, and charming and friendly and funny. And we were invited to a performance of, I think it was Raymonda, the ballet company. We're in the theatre, and we were invited, and we went to the office and got out. We were taken up the side back to. There were 3 or 4 of us from the show, but I was with Dennis, and we sat in the box, and the audience sort of was going, "Oh, that's Robert and Elizabeth people." So, and I think it was lovely that night, and that's another story. The tent shows.
Oh yes.
Yeah, he was in the tent shows. Yeah, so we worked a lot. He had a lot of sadness. He lost a child during the tent shows, or after the tent shows. He was doing television work, but he was always a friend. He was great, and he came one night to a performance of Girl of the Golden West, and I was in the chorus. He came backstage to see me, just in the chorus. And he said, "That's the best performance of an opera," he said, "I've ever seen." That it was a good show, that early production of Girl of the Golden West, with a girl from America called Marcella Reale. Drove us all mad, but she was very good.
Yeah.
Very particular.
You best elaborate on the tent shows.
Oh, the tent shows. When Robert and Elizabeth went to Sydney, we were there just before Christmas, and it was at the Tivoli Theatre, and down the bottom of near Haymarket, and a filthy old joint. It was terrible. We were up, all the brothers were up in this room in the loft of the Tivoli Theatre, and we had to clean all the pigeons droppings off the makeup benches because all the windows were broken and the pigeons used to get in. And anyway, we did the performances, got underway quite well, and suddenly they said, Andrew Gill came home, and he used to work in the office in the daytime, and he came up. He said, "The balloon's up." He said, "We're going to close." I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" So we had this flat rented, really nice little apartment with a swimming pool, and in Potts Point, and L.J. Hooker. So he said, "I'll write a letter." He was a very good letter writer, and he was very good, with sort of management people. And he fronted up to L.J. Hooker, and they said, if you can find someone to take over the apartment, we'll give you back the bond, and that's fine. And so there was a mob of lay girls living underneath us, and we used to swim with them in the pool, and they were really nice. They were very friendly, and we sort of saw them and said, "Do you know who wants a flat?" "Yes, one of our girls wants one." So they all piled up, and they looked at the flat. The girl was with them, and the boy, and they said, "Yeah, we'll take it." And so Andrew took this girl around to Hooker's, and they did an exchange, and we were out of the flat. We could leave it, and we did the last performance, and we then started to look. We went into a hotel in Potts Point, in the Cross, and we started to look for accommodation. So we were doing the last couple of performances of Robert and Elizabeth, and suddenly one night we were leaving the theatre stage door and we were going back to this hotel. Andrew had a little car, and we used to drive up to the theatre and park. You could park in Sydney in those days, and then go to the hotel. And these people were out the front. And I thought, my God, it's my cousin that used to play the piano for us on a Friday, Margaret. I said, hi, and she's got her 2 daughters. I said, hi, what are you doing? She said, we've been to the show. She said, it was absolutely marvellous. She said, we loved it. I said, we talk. She said, what do you do next? I said, we're just going to closing the end of the week. She said, what are you going to do? I said, we've been and auditioned. We went around on the Sunday and auditioned, and we got straight into the tent shows. And Andrew sang Try to Remember That Night in September, which he always sang at audition, and I sang bloody Girls Were Made to Love and Kiss. So I got in. Didn't get any. He got all the juvenile roles, in Music Man and the Prince in King and I, and I just got sort of chorus and ensemble. It was called ensemble, and I got the leading tenor lead in the barbershop quartet of Music Man. So I didn't know what that was. I'd seen Music Man, but I didn't know much about it. I knew the recording.
Ladies.
Yeah. I knew the show,
Yeah.
but I didn't. I thought, I'll do it. And I said, we're frantically looking for somewhere to live. She said, found. She said, we're going overseas. We're taking the kids. Dad's coming. She said, we're going overseas. She said, you can have the house for as long as you like, a month, 6 weeks.
That's that call over your face.
That's
Luck.
right. And it was in Balmoral, in Mandalong Road, right down the bottom near the beach. It was beautiful. Yeah. And we were there. And we used to beetle over in the car, do the tent show, and come back. When they came back, the tent show was still running. So we thought, what are we going to do? I said, let's go to the hotel and see if we can get accommodation. Went to the hotel. Hotel manager was fantastic. He said, I'll show you the rooms. He said, you can each have a room, beautiful rooms. And he said, I'll run to a meal every night before the show for you. And he said, when you come in, if you come in through the bar, he said, there'll be somebody cleaning the bar and they'll give you a schooner. And we used to go back there to the bar, have a schooner, and go up to our flats.
Win-win.
It was great, yeah.
Can we talk about Frank Thring in Robert and Elizabeth? What was Frank like to work with?
Frank. Frank was always sort of looked down on the brothers. His children. He was a bit in character about. I can't do Frank really, so I won't try to do the accent. But he said, he used to say, my spastic sons. He used to call us his spastic sons, and we used to play up a bit. Oh, well, I didn't, because I was a goody-goody, and Andrew was a goody-goody, but some of the others weren't. And they used to play tricks like we'd have to run onto the station when Robert and Elizabeth would boarding a train to go to Italy, and we'd get bored with it. We'd run on. We used to have these elastic-sided boots. Well, one night, one of them said no. One of the boys said, let's all put the boot on the wrong foot. So we looked like penguins. So on we run. We thought no one will notice. The audience didn't notice. Dennis Quilley noticed, and he went so high. Yeah. And then we waddled off. Of course, Frank came on. Frank was furious. And so he wouldn't speak to us, and he said, I want those. He said, I want them sacked, those boys. And June went into his room at the end of the show and placated him. And she sent her dresser up and said, you're all invited back to June's tonight for supper, but you've all got to come. So we all went, and we walked in, and Frank was there. And she'd placated with Frank, and he was sulking, and he looked at us in a foul mood. And she said, Frankie, you've got to be happy. She said, what will make you happy? And he said, Gladys Moncrief singing Rackety-Coo. She said, fine. And she put it on the record player, Rackety-Coo, Rackety-Coo. And then he was fine. And then we all had sausage and bacon sandwiches and lots of beer. And we had a party. And he was lovely. But he was always... He was really nice to me. I was good. They gave me a night off to go to the Sun Aria in Ballarat. And I didn't really want to do that because I hated missing a show. they put my understudy on and I went off and did this. Sang like a dog. Didn't do any good. I came back and this night I was walking past the dressing room. He said, "Hey," he said, "how did you go at Ballarat?" And I said, "Oh, not very well." I said, "I didn't sing very well." I said, "It's so cold up there." I said, "Had to go up on the train." He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "I didn't know." He said, "I would have sent you up in my helicopter." He was so kind.
Yeah.
He was lovely. He was always funny. But when the boy went in the pit, I can't tell this. Can I swear?
Oh, of course you can.
Yeah. One of the boys, we had to do a ring a rosy around Elizabeth, we used to call her Bar. And we said, "Bar's, she's come out and she's in the wheelchair and Robert's with her and everything's happy and it's spring," and we sang this thing about spring has sprung. We had to do this ring a rosy around her. We were skipping around her. This night, it was a Saturday night, and this guy, one of the kids, he said, "Oh, no." He just went, he started to sort of whiz it up, spin and spin it. It got out of hand. Anyway, he went spinning around. Suddenly he shot out of someone's hand and he went straight over to the pit and he landed with his feet on the line of the pit going, and the audience started to go, and then he fell in the pit.
Oh, no.
And the audience went, they applauded. And Frank turned around, and he was standing right next to me. He turned around to me and he said, "Oh, God," he said, "we'll be here all fucking night." But the show went on. I mean, he had a lot of business to do after that, but he got it back. Yeah. But how the guy didn't sort of hurt himself on a trombone stand or something. He was very lucky. He's a very shaken boy. And he took the interval to get over it.
He might have been born with the call as well.
I don't think he was, actually. No,
okay.
I don't think he was.
Now, your operatic career, when does that, you move full-time into
into
opera?
Well, when the 10 shows was King and I, Anna Get Your Gun, Music Man, and we rehearsed Sound of Music. No, we rehearsed Bye Bye Birdie and Sound of Music. And we rehearsed Bye Bye Birdie, we cast Sound of Music. But the tent struck terrible weather and the tent got ripped. It was the Moscow Circus tent and it got really damaged in the weather and the tent flooded, the orchestra pit flooded. We tried, everybody was called in and tried to help clean up and they couldn't clean up and they just abandoned it. And the guy pulled his money out of it. But they said, "We will go to Newcastle and we will take Music Man to Newcastle for a month. And we'll do 4 weeks in Newcastle." And some of the cast didn't come, so they had to get different people. And Andrew Guild opened it as Winthrop, I think is the name of the boy. Yeah. And then he went to join Edgley and Dorr. And then I stayed with the company and I did all the performances. And the girls in the company were going to go to Sydney because they were opening an opera company. The Elizabethan Trust was starting an opera company, a new opera company. They were forming a new opera company and they were looking for singers. And the girls were going down. And the girls came to me and they said, "Come with us. You're coming with us." I said, "Oh, opera? I can't sing. I can't sing opera." Yes. Not a word. No. Diane Holmes. Did you know Diane?
No.
She said, "No, come on. You're going. You're coming." So they said, "Be at such and such at the Potts Point at Darling Street, Elizabethan rooms at such and such a time and such a day." So we went. Someone drove me back to Sydney after the last performance. And I stayed with my cousin again, the pianist, Margaret, in Balmoral, lived with them for a while, and went in the next morning, or on the Monday, and did an audition, and I sang. I had another party piece, Lenski's aria from Eugen Onegin, June Bronhill used to love me to sing it at parties. she'd say, "Graeme, come and sing Walensky's aria." And she always had a copy of it, and I'd have to sing it. So, it was a party piece. So I got up and sang it. Stephen Hall was sort of running the company. He was going to produce the operas, and so he was there. Moffat was there, I think. I think Moffat said he was at the auditions. He remembers the audition. And they said, "We'd like to offer you chorus, and we'd like to offer you some understudies, the understudy of Pong in Turandot, and we'd like to offer you the part of Prince of Persia in Turandot." Well, I didn't quite know what that was, but I thought, well, this is permanent work. All right, I'll go in the chorus. Well, it was the best thing I ever did. It was just fantastic. I learnt so much in the chorus, and we had a lot of fun in the chorus. We did a lot of repertoire, and it was terrific sight reading. I hadn't done a lot of sight reading. I could sight read a bit. I did a lot of sight reading in the tent shows, because they give you the text, and you wouldn't have the black notes, and so someone would plunk them out on a piano. But so I got used to my ears were always very quick. But then I started to sight read with the opera, and I got quite good at that. But I did my understudy Pong, learnt that, and myself and another guy turned up one day. We had to sing it through with one of the conductors, Gertrude. We kept stopping and starting for this other guy. I'd studied it. I really knew it inside out, and sang it pretty well. And at the end of the session, he berated this guy. He said, "You've got a lot of work to do on that. You should know better than that. You've got to know your parts." And he turned to me and he said, "Very good, Graeme." That's all he said. That's all they ever said. No, "Very good, Mr. Ewer." No one was Christian names when I went into the opera in the chorus. No one. It was Mr. Ewer. John Young ran the company, and he insisted everybody was Mr. So, and the chorus masters were Mr. But we always called them Jeff or something, whatever their names were. But conductors were Mr. But then, of course, later on, it all went out the window, and it was all first names. But of course, the thing that did stick was maestro. You always called the conductor maestro. He never said to call him maestro. And we had a marvellous teacher who had been the head of music staff at Glyndebourne, called Yanni Strasser. He was an older man, and he said, "I do not like to be called maestro. Call me Yanni." He was, I could tell you stories about Yanni. Yeah. He was great. And so that was the chorus. And then they were doing Madame Butterfly, and I had to cover Goro. So I went away and I studied the part, and the team, it was a gift, the production was a gift of the Japanese government, and the team were Japanese. It was a Japanese director and a Japanese assistant called I forget what his name was. Yoshi. No, it wasn't. I can't remember their names. Doesn't matter. But the director was an old gentleman, Japanese old gentleman called Yoshi Fujiwara. It was his opera company, and he used to sit on the side. And the only thing he said, he didn't direct it. The young assistant director used to direct it, and the only thing the old director said, "What time lunch?" "What time lunch?" That's what he ever said. So the young director, he liked me. And he used me a lot, because the other Goro was the famous Adelio Zaganara, the little Italian gentleman who had sung all the minor roles with the major singers of history, and on all the Cetta recordings. It was always the Spollettas were all the second parts, the small roles were Adelio Zaganara. I'll tell you one thing. The second roles in opera, and they were my bread and butter. They made my career. They were called comprimario roles. Comprimario. And comprimario means with the first.
Oh.
So I always was very proud to be with the first, with the comprimario, the comprimario with the first. So anyway, they couldn't get on. This little man had done countless performances of Goro, and he could only do it his way. So this production with this young Japanese director, assistant director who was doing it for Yoshi Fujiwara, he thought, that it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So he did all the production with me, and they would slot this little man in, and this little waddling man would just do his own thing. So the night before the dress rehearsal, or the afternoon of the dress rehearsal, John Young, the director of the opera company, came to me and said, Mr. Ewer, he said, you are doing the Goros. You will do the performance today, the dress rehearsal, and he said you will do the opening night and subsequent performances. He said Mr. Zaganara will be doing some, but he said you will be doing the major number of performances. So I thought, well, gosh, that's good, I think. But I felt sorry for Zaggy, who was a mate. He was always about. Everyone loved Zaggy. So anyway, I went and I did it. Maureen Howard was the butterfly, and there was an English tenor. So that was good. But subsequently, when Mr. Zaganara went on, I remember I was in the audience watching it at a rehearsal, and he came on and he had this huge fan. It was huge. And he suddenly went flick and opened it and started to fan himself. And all, butterfly and the registrar and the marriage, and all you could see was this fan going. And I thought that's the reason that the Japanese people took him out.
Yes.
Yeah, he couldn't change.
Le maître ne pense qu'à sa vengeance. Il n'a pas vu couler tes larmes. Ô maîtresse, mais à dire, était là. Agir, c'est lire sur les visages. Il sait quelle trace il laisse la douleur. Il t'appartient et la vie d'Agir ne compte pas. J'allais dévier les tigres dans les forêts sauvages pour cueillir la fleur que tu aimais. J'allais au fond de la mer chercher pour toi une perle plus belle que toutes les perles. Aujourd'hui, tu es femme.
A rarity in your performing repertoire, though, was perhaps Offenbach in Death in Venice.
Oh, yeah, that was lucky. That was really lucky. I covered that part for 2 years or more, and I studied it. I had a couple of calls with pianists, but it was so long, you never got through it. And there were so many recits, just dialogue recits with accompanied chords in the orchestra. So I just took it on my own back to just learn to play on the piano the chords of the texts, so that I knew where I was in the orchestra. And I did it for years, and I always kept that up. And I used to go to the performances. Whenever there was a performance on, I'd go to, if there were 6 performances, I'd go to 4 or 5 and just watch Bob, try and learn where everything, there was a lot of moving scenery, and learn where he was in position on the stage, because they never gave you any rehearsal. And later, when it was later in about the third run of the production, there were other people. I think the guy that was covering the baritone had to have rehearsals because he was going on, And so I got a couple of rehearsals, but never the scenes I wanted to do. It was always the scenes with David, this boy that was covering John Pringle. The opening night of this final time they were doing Death in Venice, this last season, Bob did the first night, and there was a party on the stage for him. And he came like he was on the stage, and he stayed on the stage and started to meet people, lots of people, everybody's making a fuss of him. He was wet through. And I had been with him for a couple of nights because he said, look, would you just come in and be in the theatre just because I've got a bit of a cold. And I said, yeah, all right. So I used to go up in this room and just play the piano and go through the part and make sure I had it in my mind. And I went to him and I said, Bob, you're wet through. I said, I'll go and get you a gown, come into the wings. And I said, strip off and I'll give you a dressing gown. No, I'm all right. Will you take my hat? So I took his hat. It was wringing wet. And he stayed there, and the next night he was really sick. And he said, will you come in and go to the theatre again? And I said, yes. And I came in. He went on and did it. And then the next day he said, I think then he started to get better. And he said, I think I'm going to be all right. So I didn't come in this night. I wasn't going to go in. So I thought I had a rehearsal in the morning because someone was going into the Magic Flute for the 5,000th rehearsal of the Magic Flute. I went in and did Monostatos all morning. And in the afternoon I thought, I think I'll go and see my old teacher. And so I wandered around, got some flowers and went out there. She wasn't very friendly. And I said to her, she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm here to understudy Death in Venice. I said, there's a possibility I could go on tonight, but I said, I don't think I will. And she said, do you know it? I said, I hope so. So anyway, I got rid of all that, got through it. It was pretty difficult. And I went back to where we were living. I was on my own at the time, I was in Sydney. And I sat down and I actually poured a scotch, a thing I very rarely do. And I had a mouthful of scotch and suddenly there was a banging on the front door. And I went to the front door. It was the guy next door, Peter Birch from Musica Viva. He was next door neighbour. And he said, the opera company's been online on my phone line all afternoon trying to get you. Where have you been? Oh, I said, I was out in Ascot Vale. I said, seeing this teacher. He said, you're on. I said, what? He said, you're on. Bob Gard's cancelled. He said, you better get in there straight away. I said, oh, okay. So I quickly rang my mother. I said, say a few Hail Marys, Mum. And I jumped in the car and raced into the theatre. And they were ready and waiting for me. And they said, is there anything you want? I said, yeah. I said, there's... Oh, and the coach was there. Sharon Kamali was there. Fabulous. She was the prompt. Marvellous. Wonderful. Best ever. And she said, do you want anything? I said, I'd love to do the scene on the beach where all the people come. I said, and they have the strawberries and they sell the paper, the newspaper. I said, because I don't know who the choristers are. She said, yeah. She said, we'll do that. She said, she said, I'll give you a call. We'll do it in the main rehearsal room upstairs. So anyway, they called me and I went up and the whole chorus was there, the company. And they just started to do it. And I started to fuzz the lines, because I was trying to concentrate on who was where and who was what. And they said, don't worry. They knew I knew it, but it was just a mess anyway. So anyway, I said, no, that's fine. So they said, right, thank you very much. Everybody, stand by. And people were coming up saying, good luck. I said, thank you. And I went down there and sat in the room and looked at the score and thought, oh, God, what's the point? You either know it or you don't. Yeah. And then I headed over to the prompt corner where I started. And I thought, I don't know, I don't think I can get through this. It's so long. But anyway, on I went. Just floated through it all night. And there was a young assistant stage manager in the wings with a score there was a prompt. It was Charlene Camorri. And he said to me later, he said, halfway into the first recit, he said, I just shut the book. He said, your diction, he said, was fantastic. He said, you knew every word. He said, you knew just exactly where you were on the stage. He said, and I got through it. There was one moment where it was just in the second act, I was just exhausted. And I paused for a moment to just breathe and think, now, what's next? And I thought, oh, God, what is next? And the conductor had the orchestra playing a chord when and I had to sing the something about the sea. And I suddenly thought, what is it? And Sharon said, sea something. I said, there's something about the sea. And he went, thank you. And that was the only time. But it was incredible. I didn't really like the kid that was doing the boy. The boy that had done it originally was an Aboriginal boy, a dancer. He was the loveliest guy, and I thought he was magical. He was so right, and he became famous. He went overseas and became quite a famous choreographer. Anyway, he was just a kid. They were really all those boys. They were a team of boys in it. And they were all wild. But this boy was. He was from the ballet school. He was a bit standoffish, and anyway, sometime later, people came up to me and said, "You know, you were incredible. You fell in love with that boy." Oh, did I? I thought it's called acting.
Yeah. The illusion.
You have to do. Yeah.
The illusion of performance.
Yeah, because there was a moment where he walked past me into the wings, and I was sitting down. And I had to sing. It was the last words in the first act. And it was, I love you. And I never meant it. I thought, what's next? Quick, where's the score? Act 2.
You trained well.
Yeah.
And that's something that the audience don't fully comprehend, is it? When a cover goes on like that with very little rehearsal or no rehearsal at all. And the most terrifying part is the anticipation, isn't it, for the performer? But once you're out there, if you've done your work, if you know your stuff, it just takes over, doesn't it?
It was incredible. The only thing I used to be nervous about, I was terrified of, it used to absolutely terrify me during the performance, was I used to have to do a lot of recitation up on the back of the stage on steps, and I would have to move downstage into the hotel or into the street, and the street was colonnades, these huge colonnades that flew from the flies, and they would come down as I was walking down stage. And I never knew quite where they were. I thought, they're going to king hit me, But I got through it. Born on a call. Yeah. It was lucky. Beautiful. I just went cruising past them. Got down.
Well, Graeme, it's been a very varied career, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's been lovely to navigate your pathway to...
And we haven't finished. I've got more.
You've got more and more.
No.
Maybe we need to come back and do another.
No, well and good
Section.
Yeah.
But it's been lovely meeting you.
It's
and
terrific.
And
you're just the best interviewer.
Oh, thank you.
I've done a lot of interviews.
Yeah. Well, I think the trick is to listen and go with the story. And your story is so vivid.
And you're a man of the theatre too.
Yeah, and that helps, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, we're a mutual admiration society.
Yeah, very much so.
Thanks, Graeme.
Peter Eyes. Thanks so much.
Graeme recently turned 85, a perfect time to celebrate his extensive contributions to the arts in Australia and to traverse his celebrated career in this engaging conversation. My thanks to Graeme for his wit and anecdote, and from all of us, an appreciation for the gift of entertainment that you have given via your repertoire of vivid characterizations and performances. And my thanks to Brian Castlesunion for his assistance with the music tracks that you've heard today and for his encyclopedic knowledge of the operatic canon and the art form in Australia. I'm Peter Eyers. Keep well, keep warm, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time on Stages.